to GST solution. My name is Rusik Desai. Friends, in our earlier video we had already discussed the provision with respect to furnishing of details pertaining to outward supply. In that video we had already discussed that in GST regime, filing of returns in an electronic mode is a very important thing. Every returns to be filed under GST has to be in electronic mode only. Moreover, there are also certain facilities given to the recipient of goods and services that all the supplies which the supplier of goods and services is giving to the recipient, that is the purchaser, will be auto-populated and it will assist the recipient of goods and services to prepare his details of inward supplies and furnish as per the rules and as per the deadlines given in the rules. Now friends, today we are going to understand about furnishing of details of inward supplies. The provisions are prescribed in section 38, read with rule number 60 of CGST rules 2017. Friends, today we will understand what this section 38 is about. Section 38 says furnishings of details of inward supplies. In that subsection 1 talks about every registered dealer shall furnish the details of inward supply of goods or services which the supplier of goods and services has given in the GSTR 1. So it has to be matched with the corresponding sales as declared by this supplier of goods and services, and on the basis of that the recipient has to prepare his details of inward supply and declared in his GSTR 2. Now this GSTR 2 is the details of inward supplies and it has to be prepared on the basis of GSTR 2A, which is totally auto-populated form as per the details furnished by the supplier of goods and services. Friends, subsection 1 says that the recipient of the goods and services have an option to either edit, that is to modify, either accept, either reject, or either validate the goods and services, that is the sales as declared by the corresponding supplier. That means whatever sales the supplier is declaring to the recipient has to either accept it, either modify it, either validate it, or either reject it. If the corresponding recipient, that is if the purchaser of the goods and services accepts such particular sales, then on the basis of that these details will automatically flow from GSTR 2A to GSTR 2, which the recipient of goods and services has to file. Friends, it has been specifically said that all the registered payer has to perform this activity and prepare his return and file within the prescribed time. Here, it is very specifically also stated that the registered person should not include the person who is into a composition scheme, any person who is into a ISD, that is who has taken a registration of input service distributor, any person who is a non-resident taxable person, or a person who has taken the registration as per section 51 and section 52 of CGST Act 2017. Friends, subsection 2 of section 38 states that apart from the goods and services on which the recipient has to take the input tax credit, the recipient has to also declare any goods and services under which he is liable to pay under reverse charge. That means if the recipient is liable to pay goods and service tax under the reverse charge mechanism, then these details will also have to be added in the GSTR 2 manually. Say for example, in case of import of goods or import of services, the supplier of the goods or services is not liable to register under GST, and in such a case GST under reverse charge mechanism is to be paid by the recipient of goods and services, and hence these details will not automatically flow into 2A, but these details will have to be manually entered, manually added by the recipient of goods and services in order to furnish and in order to file his GSTR 2. Friend, subsection 3 says that if at all any supplies of goods and services which the supplier has made to the recipient and the recipient wants to make any changes, either the changes is with respect to the tax amount, either the changes with respect to rejections of particular invoice, then such changes will have to be communicated to the corresponding supplier also, so that the supplier needs to take the necessary steps in order to regularize the transactions. Subsection 4 says that similarly in subsection 3, if the supplier of goods and services supplies any goods to the composition dealer or a person who is into ISD, then such people will also have to communicate any changes in any sale invoices received from the supplier to the supplier. That is, if the supplier have made any sales to the composition dealer or maybe to a ISD dealer, then such ISD dealer or composition dealer, if they are making any changes in his inward supplies, then that details will also have to be communicated to the corresponding supplier to regularize the transactions. Subsection 5 of section 38 says that if any registered person have declared his inward supplies, or as well as if any registered person have accounted for the sale invoice which the supplier have given to him, and if it does not match as per section 42 and section 43, then there is an option given to the recipient to rectify such transactions. The time for rectification of such invoices is the 30th September of the next financial year or the date of filing of annual return, whichever is earlier. Such rectification will have to be done in the month in which such rectification is found out, और जब इस रिसिपिएंट को पता चलता है कि नहीं ये मंथ में गड़बड़ हो गया है, ये मंथ का ट्रांजैक्शन मेरे को रेक्टिफाई करना है, assuming if some mistakes or some error has happened in the month of April, then the month in which such errors or such rectifications is found out, then in that particular month or maybe the date of filing of annual return or 30th September of the next financial year, between such time such rectification has to be done, and in due to such rectification, if there is any shortfall of tax, then such shortfall of tax will also have to be paid along with the interest and regularize the transactions. So these are the provisions which are given for filing GSTR 2 on the basis of auto populated details GSTR 2A. Now friends, one may say, what is the deadline for filing the GSTR 2A? Section 38 says that every registered dealer will have to file the returns of inward supplies of goods and services on or before 15th day of the month succeeding the tax period for which the tax return is to be filed. Friends, along with section 38, Rule 60 is also important, wherein it has been specifically stated that GSTR 2A is into three parts, that is part A, part B and part C. There are certain transactions which will automatically flow to part A. There are certain transactions which are automatically flow to part B of GSTR 2A, and certain transactions which will automatically flow to part C of GSTR 2A. By taking the necessary actions of accepting, rejecting, modification or validating, such transactions will automatically flow from GSTR 2A to GSTR 2. Now, it has been very specifically said in sub-rule 1 of rule 60 that these GSTR 2 will have to be filed in an electronic manner. In case if there is mismatch as per section 42 or section 43, such mismatch has to be reported in GSTR 2 of the corresponding month or the related period for which the tax return is to be filed. Further, it has been specifically stated that in case if there is any transaction against which the recipient of goods and services is eligible to claim only a part input tax credit or is not liable to take any input tax credit on a particular transactions, then such details or such transactions will have to be specifically declared, that is invoice wise details of such transactions will have to be furnished in GSTR 2A. Further, it has been stated that where it is not possible for any recipient to find out the details invoice wise, then the quantum of such invoices, that is the quantum of such input tax credit which is pertaining to a non-business purpose or which is pertaining to a non-taxable supply will have to be furnished in GSTR 2 by the recipient of goods and services. If the recipient of goods and services is taking any goods from the non-resident taxable person, then in such a case these details will flow in part A of the GSTR 2A, and hence by taking the necessary actions it will have to be regularized. Similarly friends, if there is any TDS deductions or if there is any TCS, then such details of TDS and TCS will automatically flow to part C of GSTR 2A, and these details will have to be accounted while filing the GSTR 2A. Details of any input service distributor. It means friends, if the recipient of goods and services is getting any input tax credit by a way of ISD invoice, then such details will flow into part B of GSTR 2A, and it will have to be duly accounted while furnishing the return of inward supplies, that is GSTR 2. Friends, what all types of details will have to be declared while filing GSTR 2? So there are few transactions which has to be specifically declared in GSTR 2, that is invoice wise details of all the goods and services, that is invoice wise details of all the inward supplies is affected from either registered person or unregistered person will have to be taken into consideration while filing GSTR 2A. Apart from the local supplies, if there is any import purchase, that is if you are purchasing from outside the taxable territory, then such import of goods or services will also have to be accounted while filing GSTR 2A. Another, whether if there is any debit note or credit note corresponding to any invoices, that is maybe either a normal invoice or import of goods or service invoice. So debit note or credit note will also have to be accounted while filing GSTR 2A. It has to be noted that this GSTR 2 will be totally based on the auto-populated transaction GSTR 2A, while there are certain transactions pertaining to RCM or import of goods which has to be manually added by the recipient of goods and services. Friends, as of now, this GSTR 2 and GSTR 2A is not into force, is not into effect by the laws. However, it is very important that each and every transactions of sale as made by the supplier have to be matched in order to take any refunds of IGST either on zero rated supplies or inverted duty supplies. So this is all about the furnishing of details of inward supplies, that is GSTR 2, totally based on the auto-populated system in GSTR 2A. I hope this video is very informative and useful. Thanks for watching my video. Thanks a lot, friends.